Hey everybody, in this video we're going to talk about some Riot news. We're going to look at the average cost to mine Bitcoin. We have seen it recently flip. This is great for the Bitcoin miners. We're also going to look at spot Bitcoin ETFs. What did we see yesterday? On January 21, we saw a net inflow of 802 million, while BlackRock's IBIT brought in $661 million of inflows. This marks one of the most significant single day inflows. Now this article brings up the last time we saw massive inflows like this back in October. We saw the Bitcoin ETFs attract over 800 million in just 2 trading days. Oh, and I didn't say this, but now IBIT holds $39 billion in assets under management. They'll get to 50 billion in my opinion in the first quarter of 2025. The question is, do they outpace last year and the inflows we saw there? I do think so. As some of you know, there's many wealth advisors, certain brokers that don't allow Bitcoin spot ETFs. For example, Vanguard. They're not really a fan of the spot Bitcoin ETFs. However, you can buy Bitcoin miners. You can buy MicroStrategy on there. You can buy Coinbase. I do think that's going to change. I do think because of this record-breaking first year we saw from the spot Bitcoin ETFs, we will see a continued, I should say, piling in. Speaking of piling in, I think it's time to pile into the Bitcoin miners. Look at this. This is the average cost to mine Bitcoin. This isn't the most efficient Bitcoin miner. This isn't the least efficient Bitcoin miner. This is the average. There are better and there are worse. But look at this. The average cost to mine Bitcoin, $89,000. Bitcoin's price, as of this recording, $104,000 almost. The ratio of this is 0.84. And here's something that tells a lot. You can see right when the halving happened. You know, the Bitcoin miners were profitable before that point. We saw many posting profitability. BTBT, for example, CleanSpark, Iron, Mara. You know, when the halving came, right at the 20th of April, look at that spike. Going from the Bitcoin miners being profitable, you know, for a good part of 2024 and even some of 2023 to being unprofitable, basically starting right after the halving took place. Combine this with Bitcoin pulling back during Q3. Combine this with that Mt. Gox, you know, sell pressure that we saw earlier in 2024. The Bitcoin miners have been in a downtrend during this whole time. The average Bitcoin miners have been unprofitable. We are now over this blue line. That is a massive positive sign. We have not been over this. I mean, we have been over it for a while, but this hasn't been reflected in earnings yet. For example, look at a good part of 2020. Bitcoin's price was well above the cost to mine Bitcoin. Keep in mind, this basically happened the same time last cycle. Right around November of 2020 is when they started coming back to profitability on average. And same here, right around November of 2024 is when they started getting this line under Bitcoin's price, which is positive. This means their cost to mine is less than the cost of Bitcoin. If we see what we saw in 2020 and 2021, when the average cost of Bitcoin is substantially less than Bitcoin's price, we will see the Bitcoin miners rally once they get to profitability, just like we saw in 2020. It really starts taking off in 2021 when Bitcoin starts blasting off at that post-halving year. This is when the Bitcoin miners become that much more profitable. Be aware that the price to mine was substantially less than the cost of Bitcoin even in a part of 2022. During the bear market, it basically flipped back in June of 2022, so late 2022. But anyways, I'll leave this down below for you guys to look at it yourselves. Bitcoin again is above the average cost to mine Bitcoin. After the halving took it away, things are looking pretty bright for 2025. Now here's some interesting news from Riot. Riot launches a formal evaluation of potential AI uses for the remaining 600 megawatts of power capacity at the Corsicana facility. Sorry, God. Here's some bad news. They halted their previously announced phase 2 Bitcoin mining expansion in Corsicana. Sorry, I don't live there, so I don't know how to say it. It says here they believe the mixed use of this facility has potential to maximize value for shareholders. Sure. By providing long-term predictable cash flows, complement existing Bitcoin mining operations. You know, to me, this is them feeling the pressure. They're trying to diversify their income streams. I like the aspect of that. But to me, the reason they're doing this is because their Bitcoin mining is having some hard times. Because of this potential venture into AI, they are going to lower their expected hash rate year end. They now expect to end the year at a 38 exahash. They are getting passed dramatically by CleanSpark, by Mara. Now with them going into AI, Mara and CleanSpark are going to be the leaders. End of story. They previously expected to end 2025 with a hash rate of 46.7. And one thing to think about too is their failed attempt of taking over Bitfarms. If it wasn't for that, they would probably be well within this target by year end. If they were going to acquire Bitfarms, it seems like that's not going to happen. Who knows what the future holds? From what I understand, they still have almost 20% of the position, but let me know guys, I could be wrong there. I don't pay super close attention to Riot. Now looking at Riot's chart on the kind of closer term, we're in this descending channel in my opinion. Lower highs, lower lows pretty consistently. We need to break this descending trend. Also on the longer term, this might need to be adjusted a little better. But on the longer term, we need to break this level. I mean, you can see somewhere around here we need to break. Depends on where the market decides. We do need to break this descending resistance, break this downtrend, start seeing higher highs. We have been setting higher lows as of recently and higher highs. It's a matter of breaking this pattern though. But like I said, it is a matter of breaking our slightly longer term downtrend to continue on the shorter term uptrend. Something very encouraging with Riot, let's get this out of the way, is the golden cross that they saw back in early December. Not all Bitcoin miners are facing this golden cross. Many Bitcoin miners are still under their 50 MA, for example. Many Bitcoin miners still have to see a golden cross after the death cross from months back, but this is definitely a positive. Riot is now above its 50 MA. It bounced off its 200 MA. That is a fantastic sign, as well as filling that gap at around the same time. One thing with Riot is they are expecting an unprofitable quarter for Q4, but consider when guidance was given. Guidance was given in October. This was when Bitcoin was substantially lower in price. You know, yesterday when I was talking about Iron and how they reported in early November, Bitcoin's price wasn't yet at $100,000. Many of these Bitcoin miners, they gave forward guidance. It depends on when their earnings was for Q3, but most of them gave forward guidance when we weren't even at the end of Q4 yet. And Bitcoin ended Q4 very, very strong at prices we never saw before. So there is a potential that Riot sees a profitable quarter. I personally doubt it for Riot. I think there's a possibility that something like CleanSpark does. They're projected to. But even that isn't 100% certainty. Riot does expect a massive revenue. Pretty massive revenue numbers, the likes of which we have never seen. Their best was like a $84 million quarter. So there's a good $50 million increase in revenue. It would be fantastic to see them move to profitability. But I do believe as it becomes clear that the Bitcoin miners are profitable, this is when the piling in happens again. Hopefully you guys took advantage of the halving, the pullback that we experienced over the couple of months here. That pullback was a massive buying opportunity. Look at Riot back in September. It was a $6 stock. It has doubled since. I do think it will do a lot more than double from here. And looking at its bottom, it was like a $3.30 stock. So far, it's only up 300%. Of the Bitcoin miners, this is one of the worst performers of all. We have other Bitcoin miners like Iron, for example, that's around 10x, even with it not being near 52-week highs, even with the Bitcoin miners pulling back from the halving. There are Bitcoin miners that are still 10x from their bear market lows. Not the case with Riot. Riot has been very disappointing, and I'm sure you guys agree. Now here, honestly, there's a Bitcoin miner that I'm not sure will outperform Bitcoin's cycle low to top. While I do think CleanSpark, Iron, a lot of the other Bitcoin miners will outperform Bitcoin from the bear market low to cycle top. Not all-time high. These Bitcoin miners, in my opinion, aren't going to break all-time high. Maybe some do, but in my opinion, many won't. Most won't. The Bitcoin miners are not the play to hold for multiple years. The Bitcoin miners are the play to buy during the bear market, during crypto winter, and sell while things are great. In my opinion, many of them will outperform Bitcoin. Possibly not Riot. For Riot to do what I think Bitcoin will do, I believe Bitcoin will do a 10x from its bear market to top, or about 150K. Maybe that's too conservative. Maybe some people think that's too bullish. You can ask one person, they'll say you're crazy, this is way too bearish. You'll have another person saying you're crazy, this is way too optimistic. So I'm damned either way. But my price target for Bitcoin is 150K. I think that is reachable. I think that is doable. Maybe we do more than that, the more the merrier. But for Bitcoin to do a 10x from 15K to 150K, for Riot to do the same performance, just the same, not even outperform from bear market low to top, Riot would have to do, for a 10x, it would have to get to $36. Is that going to happen? Who knows? I think that might be a little too optimistic for the rest of this cycle. But when the Bitcoin miners move back to profitability, things do change very, very quickly. Now, I showed you guys last cycle where the average price to mine Bitcoin went lower than Bitcoin's price, which is what we're in right now. This is what is happening right now. We finally saw the flip. Most Bitcoin miners are mining at a profit. When this happened last cycle, remember I told you guys in November when this happened, we saw the Bitcoin miners flip, get back to profitability. The cost to mine Bitcoin was lower than the price of Bitcoin. And then basically until 2022, we saw that continue. We saw the price of Bitcoin remaining higher than the price to mine Bitcoin. And look at what Riot did. Look at how range bound it was. Kind of like this. Super range bound. Couldn't break out. Finally got that profitability. And boom, the sky's the limit. Are we going to do the exact same? Is Riot going to go 70, 80, break its previous all-time highs? I personally highly doubt it. I'm not going to stick around to find out. I'm going to follow the cycle. I'm going to sell my Bitcoin miners right around the 6 month from now mark. A little earlier, a little later. Selling and scaling out. Not just selling everything in one day, but scaling out while times are good. For Riot to do the same performance it did on the breakout. Okay, so this is on the breakout around November when they were getting profitable again. to the top, that was a 2,000 or 20x. For Riot to do a 20x from here, basically needs to get $60. I don't know about that. I would be very ecstatic to see that. But if it doesn't happen and we're in late 2025, you have to realize it's likely not going to happen until next cycle, if at all. One thing to realize too is while the Bitcoin miners are obviously tied to good gains if they're profitable or pulling back if they're not, they're also very tied to Bitcoin. Who would have thought? Look at when many of the Bitcoin miners were profitable. I showed you guys that chart. I showed you that the average cost of Bitcoin, the average price to mine Bitcoin was lower all the way into 2022. There were still Bitcoin miners that were mining at a price lower than Bitcoin's price. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee this morning. But look at what happened. Even regardless of that, we did see our downturn. When Bitcoin started pulling back, it was game over for the Bitcoin miners, regardless of if there was still potential for profitability, regardless if the cost of Bitcoin was much higher than the price to mine Bitcoin. They were going to track Bitcoin, and they were going to track earnings. And one thing I was thinking was in 2026, we might see some of the Bitcoin miners still posting profitability in early 2026. But following the cycle, that should be the end of Bitcoin's bull run. Just because there's a possibility the Bitcoin miners post one final profitable quarter in 2026 doesn't necessarily mean you want to stick around, if it's anything like last cycle, that is. But what do you guys think? Do you think the Bitcoin miners are going to do similarly to what they did last cycle? They are so far doing what they have done last cycle, pulled back after the halving, and then we get that breakout in the new year, in that post-halving year. This is when this happens. We start getting that beginning of a run-up in, December, November of the halving year, 2020, 2024, we're starting to get that run up. Once they broke this descending resistance, we broke out like crazy. In my opinion, once we break this descending resistance, come on guys, I mean, it's looking a lot similar. We're about to move back to profitability. Bitcoin's about to have a stellar 2025 in my opinion. With the spot Bitcoin ETF inflows, there's no end in sight. We are going to see massive inflows this year, similar to what we saw last year. Regulations might open it up to even more potential investors. How do you guys feel about Riot? Do you think we're going to see what we saw last cycle when we finally break out? When we finally realize that the Bitcoin miners are profitable again? Always interested in your thoughts and opinions. What's your favorite Bitcoin miner? Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.